In Book 2, Chapter 17 of Avatar: The Last Airbender, an episode called Lake Laogai that aired on November 3, 2006, a boy named Jet lies on the floor of an underground chamber beneath Ba Sing Se. His body broken by a direct strike from the Dai Li, Katara kneels beside him. She offers to heal him, and Jet, with the last energy he has, tells her to go, that he will be fine. Smellerby and Longshot stay behind. Toph, as the group leaves, says quietly that he was lying. The show cuts away. You never see Jet again. No burial, no confirmation, no body, just a hallway, and a silence and the understanding that a children's network could show you a death but could not quite bring itself to say the word. That is one of the smaller mysteries in Avatar: The Last Airbender, and yet it captures something essential about the way this show operates. It trusts you to understand what it cannot say. It leaves doors open that it never walks back through. It raises questions that 3 seasons, 61 episodes, and over 15 years of fan discussion have never fully answered. This is a show built on mysteries. Not the cheap kind, not the mysteries that exist to sell merchandise or tease a sequel, but the kind that grow out of a world so carefully constructed that its edges extend past the frame. The questions Avatar leaves unanswered are not failures of storytelling, they are evidence of a world that is bigger than the story being told inside it. And tonight, we are going to sit with those questions, not to solve them. Most of them cannot be solved, but to understand why they matter, what they reveal about the show, and why after all these years they still keep people awake at night. If you are enjoying this kind of long-form content, subscribing to the channel helps more than you might think. It is free and it keeps videos like this coming. Now, let us begin. There are roughly 10 mysteries and theories worth exploring tonight, and they range from the intimate to the cosmic. Some are about individual characters. Some are about the nature of bending itself. Some are about the world the show built and the history it implied but never confirmed. We will move through them roughly in the order the show introduces them, starting with something that happens before the first episode even begins. The first mystery is the one that starts the entire series, and it is deceptively simple. How did Aang survive 100 years frozen in an iceberg? The show gives you the surface answer in the pilot episode, which aired on February 21st, 2005. Aang ran away from the Southern Air Temple. He was caught in a storm over the ocean. Appa went under, and in the moment of crisis, the Avatar state activated. Aang's eyes glowed, and a sphere of ice formed around him and his bison, preserving them in suspended animation for a century. But the surface answer raises deeper questions. The Avatar state, as the show defines it across 3 seasons, is a defense mechanism. It activates when the Avatar is in mortal danger, channeling the knowledge and power of every previous Avatar to protect the current one. And it has done extraordinary things. It has leveled armies, it has reshaped landscapes, it has generated enough raw power to end a war in minutes. But it has never, in any other instance across the entire series, created a self-sustaining cryogenic preservation system that lasted for 100 years. Nothing in the show's established rules of water bending or even the Avatar state explains how a 12-year-old boy could be frozen in ice and survive with his vital functions intact for a full century. Water bending can heal. It can cut through steel, it can control the tides. But suspended animation for 100 years is not water bending. It is something else entirely. And the show never explains what that something else is. It presents it as a fact and moves on, because the story is not about how Aang survived the ice. The story is about what he does after he wakes up. But the mystery lingers, because if the Avatar state can do this, if it can generate a phenomenon that no other form of bending has ever replicated, then the Avatar state itself is far stranger and far more powerful than even the show acknowledges. It suggests that the Avatar's connection to past lives is not just a source of combat power, but a source of something closer to biological manipulation. It suggests that the Avatar, in extremis, can alter the fundamental relationship between a human body and time. There is a theory among fans that the iceberg was not a product of the Avatar state alone, that it was, in fact, a collaboration between Aang and the ocean spirit. The ocean spirit, La, is one of the 2 primordial spirits that crossed from the spirit world into the physical world at the very beginning of time. In Book 1, Chapter 20, The Siege of the North Part 2, La merges with Aang to form a massive water creature that devastates the Fire Nation fleet. This establishes that the ocean spirit is both aware of the Avatar and willing to intervene on the Avatar's behalf. The theory proposes that when Aang went under in that storm, the Avatar state was not the only force acting. La, sensing that the Avatar was about to die, intervened. The spirit wrapped itself around Aang in a cocoon of ocean water, and the Avatar state froze it solid. And together, the spirit and the avatar created something neither could have created alone. A 100-year preservation that was part bending, part spiritual, and part something the show has no vocabulary for. The show never confirms this. It never even hints at it directly. But it is consistent with the rules the show establishes, and it explains something that the avatar state alone cannot. And it raises a question that is, in some ways, more unsettling than the original mystery. If the ocean spirit was protecting Aang all along, why did it let the air nomads die? Why did it intervene for one boy and not for an entire civilization? The answer, if there is one, might be that the spirits do not care about human civilizations. They care about balance, and the avatar is the mechanism of balance. Saving Aang was not a moral choice, it was a structural one. It was the universe protecting its own immune system. The second mystery is the one the show saves for its very last scene. What happened to Zuko's mother? This is, without question, the most famous unresolved storyline in Avatar. In the series finale, after Ozai has been defeated, Zuko visits his father in prison, and the last line of the last scene before the credits roll is Zuko asking, simply, "Where is my mother?" The show ends. The question hangs in the air, and for years it was the single most discussed mystery in the entire fandom. The show tells you enough about Ursa to make the mystery devastating. In Book 2, Chapter 7, Zuko Alone, which aired on May 12, 2006, a series of flashbacks reveal the texture of Zuko's childhood. Ursa is gentle, protective. She is the only person in the royal household who treats Zuko with unconditional love. Ozai sees Zuko as weak. Azula sees him as a rival, but Ursa sees him as her son. And the flashbacks are saturated with the warmth of a mother who knows that her family is dangerous and is trying, quietly, to shield her child from the worst of it. The flashbacks also reveal the night everything changed. Fire Lord Azulan, Ozai's father, ordered Ozai to kill Zuko as punishment for requesting the throne. And Ursa, upon learning this, made a deal. She would provide Ozai with a poison, an odorless, untraceable compound, to kill Azulan. In exchange, Zuko would be spared. But the cost was banishment. Ursa would leave the Fire Nation and never return. The show never tells you where she went. It never tells you if she is alive. It never tells you if she tried to come back, if she watched from a distance, if she mourned her children from exile. The last image you have of Ursa is a woman walking away from everything she loves to save her son's life, and then disappearing into the kind of silence that only grief can create. The graphic novel trilogy The Search, published in 2013, eventually answered the question. Ursa returned to her hometown, reconnected with her former love Ikem, and through the intervention of a spirit called the Mother of Faces, received a new identity and a new face. She lived for years as a woman named Noriko, with no memory of her time in the palace, no memory of her children, no memory of the sacrifice she made. When Zuko finally finds her, she does not recognize him. But even with the comics providing an answer, the mystery persists in the show itself, because the show is where most people experience this story. And in the show, Ursa simply vanishes. And there is something important about that vanishing that the comics, for all their detail, cannot replicate. The show's refusal to answer the question is itself an artistic statement. It is saying that some questions do not have satisfying answers, that some people disappear and you never learn why, that the missing piece of a story can be more powerful than the completed picture. Zuko's entire arc is shaped by this absence. His desperation to capture the Avatar is, at its deepest layer, a desperate attempt to earn back the love of a parent. Not Ozai's love, because Ozai's love was never real, but the idea of parental love itself, the thing that Ursa represented and that her disappearance took from him. When Zuko stands in front of Ozai in the finale and says he knows what happened to his great-grandfather, he is not just confronting a tyrant. He is confronting the void his mother left behind, the absence that defined him. The question he has been asking since he was a child, standing in a hallway watching his mother walk away. The third mystery is quieter, stranger, and in some ways deeper than the first two. How does Iroh see into the spirit world? In Book 1, Chapter 7, Winter Solstice Part 1, The Spirit World, which aired on April 8, 2005, Aang enters the spirit world for the first time. He is riding Roku's dragon through the sky, invisible to everyone in the physical world. The camera pans across the landscape. Soldiers do not see him. Animals do not see him. He is a ghost, a presence that exists on a different frequency than the material world. And then the camera finds Iroh. Iroh is sitting by a small fire, away from the group, alone. And he looks up. He sees Aang. He sees the dragon. He waves. No one else in the show can do this. No other non-Avatar character demonstrates the ability to perceive spirits without being in the spirit world themselves. And the show never, across 3 seasons, explains how Iroh can. It treats it as a detail, a small character moment that tells you something about Iroh without telling you what that something is. And that is the mystery. The clues are scattered across the series, never assembled into an explanation. Iroh is called the Dragon of the West, a title he earned by claiming to have slain the last dragon, when in fact, he lied to protect Ran and Shaw, the 2 surviving dragons he encountered with the Sun Warriors. Iroh traveled to the spirit world after the death of his son Lu Ten at the siege of Ba Sing Se, a journey he references but never describes in detail. Iroh can redirect lightning, a technique he invented by studying waterbending, suggesting a mind that thinks across the boundaries that separate the 4 nations. And in the finale of The Legend of Korra, set decades after the original series, Iroh is revealed to have chosen to leave his physical body behind and live permanently in the spirit world. Each of these details suggests a connection between Iroh and the spirit realm that goes far beyond what the show explicitly states. There is a theory, widely discussed in the fandom, that Iroh's journey to the spirit world after Lu Ten's death changed him in a fundamental way, not just emotionally, not just philosophically, but ontologically. That he went in as a grieving father and came out as something partially spiritual. That some part of him remained in the spirit world, and that this residual connection is what allows him to perceive spirits in the physical world. Another theory suggests that Iroh may have encountered or even merged with a spirit during his journey, similar to how Yu merged with the moon spirit or how Rava merged with Wan in the ancient origins of the Avatar. If this is true, then Iroh is not fully human in the way the other characters are. He is something in between. A bridge between worlds, not unlike the Avatar himself, but without the formal title or the cycle of reincarnation. The show never confirms either theory. It simply presents you with a man who waves at a dragon no one else can see, and leaves you to make of it what you will. And the effect is that Iroh becomes, in the context of the show, a living mystery. A character who is clearly more than he appears, whose depth extends into territory the show refuses to map. He is the uncle who brews tea and plays Pai Sho, and also apparently can see things that exist on the other side of reality. And the show trusts you to hold that contradiction without needing it resolved. The 4th mystery takes us from the spiritual to the physical, from the invisible to the visceral. It is the mystery of Combustion Man. In Book 3, Zuko hires an assassin to kill the Avatar. The assassin has no name in the show. He never speaks a single word. He is enormous, tattooed, and he has a 3rd eye on his forehead from which he fires concentrated beams of explosive energy. The fans call him Combustion Man. The show calls him nothing. And the mystery is not who he is. The mystery is what he is. Firebending, as the show establishes across 3 seasons, requires physical motion. Firebenders use martial arts forms derived from northern Shaolin to generate and direct fire from their bodies. The fire originates in the breath, moves through the body, and exits through the fists or feet. Every firebender in the show follows this pattern. Iroh teaches it. Jung teaches it. The Sun Warriors demonstrate its oldest form. Firebending is physical. It is muscular. It is about the body. Combustion Man does not use his body. He uses his mind. He stands still, focuses his chi through the 3rd eye tattoo on his forehead, and fires a beam of pure combustive force that detonates on impact. There is no martial arts form. There is no movement. There is just focus, a moment of concentration, and then an explosion. The show never explains how this is possible. It never connects Combustion Man to any school of firebending, any technique, any tradition. He simply exists as an anomaly, a firebender who operates outside the rules the show has spent 2.5 seasons establishing. And his death in Book 3, Chapter 12, The Western Air Temple, is equally anomalous. Sokka hits him in the forehead with his boomerang. Combustion Man tries to fire again. The beam backfires. He explodes. The implication is that the 3rd eye tattoo is not a decoration. It is a functional modification. Something about the tattoo, or the point on the body it marks, is essential to the technique. If the mechanism is disrupted, the power becomes self-destructive. This connects to the show's chakra system. Guru Pathik, in Book 2, Chapter 19, the Guru explains that the body has 7 chakras, energy pools along the spine. The 6th chakra, the light chakra, is located at the forehead. It deals with insight and is blocked by illusion. The theory that emerges from this is that Combustion Man has somehow opened his 6th chakra to an extreme degree, far beyond what normal meditation or training would achieve. He has turned a spiritual energy center into a weapon. And the consequence of this extreme opening is that the chakra becomes both his greatest power and his greatest vulnerability. When the mechanism is blocked, the energy has nowhere to go. It turns inward. It destroys him. But this raises a deeper question. If one chakra can be weaponized, can others? What would it look like if someone opened their heart chakra to an extreme degree? Their sound chakra? Their truth chakra? The show introduces Combustion Man and then kills him without exploring these implications. And the result is that his existence becomes a window into a version of the Avatar world that the show chose not to explore. A version where bending is not tied to physical movement at all, but to pure mental focus. A version where the body is not the instrument of bending, but the thing that gets in the way of it. The legend of Korra later introduces Pili, another combustion bender, but her existence only deepens the mystery. It confirms that Combustion Man was not unique, that this is a learnable or inheritable ability, and yet neither show explains its origins. It is, in the entire Avatar universe, the form of bending that the writers seem least interested in explaining. And that silence is, in itself, a kind of mystery, as if the show looked at what it had created and decided that some things are better left unexplored. The fifth mystery is one that the show acknowledges directly, breaks the fourth wall over, and then still never resolves. Did Jet actually die? We return to that scene in Lake Laogai. Jet, struck by Longfang's earthbending, lies on the ground. Katara offers to heal him. Jet tells her to go, and as the group leaves, Toph says he was lying, meaning that Jet was not going to be fine, meaning that the injury was fatal, meaning that a recurring character on a Nickelodeon show has just died on screen without the show being allowed to say so. The creators of Avatar, Michael Dante DiMartino and Brian Konietzko, were asked about this in interviews and at conventions. Their response became one of the most quoted behind-the-scenes moments in the show's history. The question was whether Jet was really dead, and the answer, given with the kind of resignation that only comes from fighting with the network's standards and practices department, was straightforward. For the record, Jet is dead. But the show itself never confirms this, and the ambiguity is not accidental. Nickelodeon, as a children's network, had restrictions on depicting death. Characters could be defeated, they could be imprisoned, they could disappear. But showing a child die unambiguously and on screen was a line the network was not willing to cross. And so, the show found a way to tell you Jet was dead without saying the word. It used implication. It used Toph's seismic sense, her ability to detect lies through heartbeat, to communicate a truth that the script was not allowed to state. This creates a strange and fascinating tension between the show and its own text. The writers know Jet is dead. The audience, if they are paying attention, knows Jet is dead. Toph knows Jet is dead. But the show, constrained by its medium and its network, exists in a state of permanent ambiguity. Jet is dead and not dead simultaneously. He is the Schrodinger's character of children's television, a boy whose fate depends entirely on whether you trust the subtext more than the text. And the mystery this creates is not really about Jet. It is about the show's relationship with its own audience. Avatar treats its viewers as intelligent. It has always done this. It asks you to follow complex political narratives, to engage with genuine philosophy, to understand character motivations that are layered and contradictory. And in the Jet scene, it asks you to read between the lines, to understand that the silence after Toph's statement is the show telling you what it is not allowed to tell you. It is one of the earliest and most effective examples of a children's show trusting its audience to handle a truth that the network did not trust them with. The sixth mystery is perhaps the strangest one the show introduces, because it is not really a question about a character or a plot point. It is a question about the nature of bending itself. Where did bloodbending come from, and what does it imply about the limits of waterbending? In Book 3, Chapter 8, The Puppet Master, which aired on November 9, 2007, Katara meets an old woman named Hama. Hama is a former waterbender from the Southern Water Tribe, captured by the Fire Nation during their raids and imprisoned for decades. And in her imprisonment, Hala discovered something. She discovered that the human body is made largely of water, and she learned to bend that water, to control it, to move a person's body against their will, pulling their limbs like a puppeteer pulling strings. The technique is called bloodbending, and it is the darkest form of bending the show ever introduces. It requires a full moon to amplify the waterbender's power, and it requires a kind of cruelty that most waterbenders would never contemplate. Because bloodbending is not just physically controlling someone, it is violating them. It is removing their agency, their autonomy, their ability to choose what their own body does. It is, in a very real sense, a form of slavery enacted through bending. Hama teaches Katara the technique against Katara's will, forcing her into a situation where bloodbending is the only way to protect herself and her friends. And Katara learns it. And the horror on her face when she does is one of the most powerful moments in the series, because she has just crossed a line that she did not even know existed. She has discovered that her element, the element of healing and life and community, can be turned into a tool of absolute control. The mystery here is not about Hama specifically. It is about what bloodbending reveals about the relationship between a bender and their element. The show establishes across all 3 books that each element has a philosophy, a way of seeing the world that shapes the bender as much as the bender shapes the element. Water is about adaptation, flow, community. Earth is about stability, endurance, directness. Fire is about power, will, transformation. Air is about freedom, detachment, evasion. But bloodbending suggests that these philosophies are not inherent to the elements. They are cultural. They are the stories people tell about their own power. Water is not inherently about healing and community. Water is water. It is a physical substance that obeys physical laws. And if a waterbender is desperate enough, creative enough, and willing to abandon the cultural values attached to their element, they can use water to do things that the culture never imagined and would never sanction. This is a deeply unsettling idea, and the show knows it, because if the philosophy of bending is cultural rather than inherent, then every form of bending has a shadow form, a version of itself that its culture has chosen not to explore. Earth can imprison people inside their own buildings. Air can suffocate. Fire can be used to stop someone's heart. The elements are not moral, they are tools. And the morality comes from the bender, not the bending. The legend of Korra later expands on this by introducing bloodbenders who can bend without a full moon, and even without physical movement, suggesting that Hama only scratched the surface of what is possible. And this expansion only deepens the mystery. If bloodbending can be done without a full moon, then the limitation was not physical, it was psychological. Hama needed the full moon because she believed she needed it. The later bloodbenders did not have that belief, and so they did not have that limitation, which means that the limits of bending are not set by physics. They are set by imagination. And that is perhaps the most frightening idea in the entire Avatar universe. The 7th mystery is one that hides in plain sight for most of the series and only becomes visible when you start asking a question the show never explicitly poses. Were there other air nomad survivors? The show tells you that the Fire Nation committed genocide against the air nomads, wiping out an entire civilization in a single coordinated assault powered by Sozin's comet. The attack targeted all 4 air temples simultaneously. The monks, the nuns, the children, the elderly, the sky bison, all of them. The show presents this as total. Aang is the last airbender. It is in the title. The genocide was complete. But was it? Consider what the show actually shows you. In Book 1, Chapter 3, The Southern Air Temple, which aired on February 25, 2005, Aang returns to his home and finds it empty. He finds Gyatso's skeleton surrounded by the remains of Fire Nation soldiers, indicating that Gyatso fought back and took many of his attackers with him before he fell. The temple is abandoned. There is no one left. But the show only visits 2 of the 4 air temples in any detail during the original series, the Southern Air Temple and the Western Air Temple. The Northern and Eastern temples are referenced but never fully explored, and the show establishes that the air nomads were, by definition, nomadic. They traveled, they moved between the 4 temples and across the world. The temples were home bases, not permanent residences. This means that at any given time, some air nomads would have been outside the temples, traveling between them, visiting other nations, living among other peoples. The Fire Nation could destroy every temple and kill every monk inside them and still miss the ones who were not home when the soldiers arrived. The show addresses this obliquely. In Book 3, Chapter 13, The Firebending Masters, Aang and Zuko visit the Sun Warriors, a civilization of firebenders that the rest of the world believes to be extinct. The Sun Warriors survived because they hid. They retreated to a remote location and let the world believe they were gone. Their continued existence is a secret, known to no one outside their own community. If the Sun Warriors can hide an entire civilization for centuries, could air nomads have done the same? Could a small group of airbenders traveling when the attack came have fled to remote corners of the world and hidden? The air nomads were the most mobile culture in the Avatar world. They had sky bison, they could reach places no one else could, mountains, islands, regions so isolated that the Fire Nation would never think to look there. The show does not answer this question. It commits to the idea that Aang is the last airbender, and the emotional weight of the series depends on this being true. But the world the show builds makes total genocide, genuinely total genocide with 0 survivors, implausible. And the show seems aware of this tension because it never has a character state with absolute certainty that every single air nomad was killed. It states that the air nomads were wiped out. It states that Aang is the last airbender, but it never has a character say we searched every corner of the world and confirmed that no one survived. The language is always slightly less than absolute. The Legend of Korra eventually introduces new airbenders through harmonic convergence, sidestepping the genetic question entirely. But the original show leaves the door open. Just barely. Just enough to wonder. And the wondering is the point, because the alternative, the certainty that every single member of an entire civilization was killed, is a weight the show carries with remarkable seriousness for a program that aired on Nickelodeon at 6 in the evening. The eighth mystery is about a creature that appears in a single episode, speaks fewer than 100 words, and changes the entire trajectory of the series. The Lion Turtle. In the final arc of Book 3, Aang is struggling with the question that has defined his character since the beginning. He must defeat Fire Lord Ozai. Everyone he trusts, every past avatar, every friend, every mentor, tells him the same thing. He must kill Ozai. There is no other way. And Aang, because he is an air nomad, because his culture taught him that all life is sacred, cannot accept this. He meditates on a small island. He falls asleep, and when he wakes up, the island is moving. It is not an island at all. It is a lion turtle, an ancient being the size of a small mountain, swimming through the ocean with Aang on its back. The lion turtle speaks to Aang. It tells him that in the era before the Avatar, people did not bend the elements. They bent the energy within themselves. And then it touches Aang's chest and forehead, and it gives him the ability to energy bend, the ability to remove another person's bending without killing them. The answer to the impossible question? The third option that no one else could see. The mystery here is layered. The first layer is mechanical. How does energy bending work? The show demonstrates it exactly once, in the finale, and the rules it establishes are minimal. The bender's spirit must be unbendable, or they will be consumed by the other person's energy. That is the only rule. Everything else is unknown. Can energy bending give bending as well as take it away? Can it be used on non-benders? Can it be taught, or was it a one-time gift from the lion turtle? The show does not say. The second layer is philosophical. The lion turtle's statement that people once bent the energy within themselves, not the external elements, suggests that bending as the Avatar world knows it is not the original form of human power. It is a later development, a specialization. People once had access to something more fundamental, more direct, more connected to the raw energy of life itself. And at some point they lost it. They traded the universal for the specific. They gave up the ability to bend energy for the ability to bend water, earth, fire, or air. This reframes the entire mythology of the Avatar world. If energy bending is the original form of bending, then the four elements are not the foundation of the world. They are the fragments of something that used to be whole. And the Avatar, the person who can bend all four elements, is not the most powerful bender. The Avatar is the person who comes closest to what everyone used to be. The Avatar is not an evolution. The Avatar is a reminder of what was lost. The third layer is narrative. Many fans, when the finale first aired on July 19, 2008, criticized the lion turtle as a deus ex machina, a solution that came out of nowhere to resolve an impossible dilemma. And in a strictly structural sense, they were right. The lion turtle appears in the 11th hour, provides a power that has never been mentioned before, and solves the central conflict of the series. That is, by definition, a deus ex machina. But the show seeds the lion turtle earlier than most people realize. In Book 2, Chapter 10, The Library, Aang finds a scroll in Wan Shi Tung's library that depicts a lion turtle. The image is brief, easy to miss, but it is there. And in Book 3, Chapter 11, The Day of Black Sun Part 2, there is a carving of a lion turtle on the wall of the Fire Nation bunker. These are small details, blink and you miss them details, but they establish that the lion turtle exists in the world before it appears in the story. It is not invented for the finale. It is revealed. Whether this makes it a legitimate plot resolution or a clever disguise for a deus ex machina is, itself, one of the great debates in Avatar fandom. And the show, characteristically, does not weigh in. It presents the lion turtle, lets it speak its piece, and then lets it swim away. It leaves you with a new ability, a new cosmology, and more questions than answers. Which, when you think about it, is exactly what a creature that old would do. The ninth mystery is one that reveals itself slowly, across all three books, and it is about a character the show initially presents as comic relief. It is the mystery of what Sokka truly represents, and specifically, the mystery of the Space Sword. In Book 3, Chapter 4, Sokka's Master, which aired on October 12, 2007, Sokka trains with Piandao, a master swordsman and member of the Order of the White Lotus. Sokka forges a sword from a meteorite, a fallen piece of space rock that produces a blade unlike any other in the Avatar world. The sword is black. It is unique. It is the physical manifestation of Sokka's defining trait, which is not strength or bending, but ingenuity, the ability to take something no one else would think to use and turn it into something no one else could have made. Sokka carries the space sword through the rest of Book 3. He uses it in the finale, and then, during the battle with the Fire Nation airships, he and Toph are hanging from the edge of an airship, about to fall. Sokka uses his boomerang and his sword to save them, throwing both weapons to cut through a section of the hull. They survive, but the boomerang and the sword fall into the clouds and are never seen again. The show does not address this. The finale moves on. Sokka is fine. He survives, he celebrates, he jokes. But his sword, the meteorite blade he forged with his own hands, the weapon that symbolized his growth from the goofy comic relief character to a genuine strategist and warrior, is gone, lost in the clouds, unrecovered. And the mystery is not really about the sword. It is about what the show is saying by taking it from him. Sokka's entire arc is about proving that a non-bender can matter in a world defined by bending. The sword is the physical proof of that thesis, and the show takes it away in the final battle, casually, almost as an afterthought, and never brings it up again. One reading is that the show ran out of time. The finale is dense, packed with battles and resolutions, and there simply was not room to address Sokka recovering his sword. This is probably the practical answer, but the thematic reading is more interesting. The thematic reading says that Sokka does not need the sword, that the sword was always a symbol, and symbols can be lost because the thing they represent has already been internalized. Sokka does not need a meteorite blade to prove he matters. He proved it by cutting through an airship hull to save Toph's life. The act was the point. The sword was just the tool. And tools can be replaced. Character cannot. But fans have never stopped wondering, does Sokka go back for it? Does he forge a new one? Is the space sword still lying in a field somewhere in the Earth Kingdom, waiting to be found? The show leaves these questions unanswered, and the comic books and sequel series never definitively address them. The space sword, like Jet, exists in a state of permanent narrative suspension. Gone but not confirmed gone. Lost but not confirmed lost. A small, quiet mystery that says something large and complicated about what it means to grow up. The 10th mystery is one that encompasses all the others, because it is about the thing that makes every other mystery possible. It is the mystery of the Avatar cycle itself. What happens when it breaks? The show tells you multiple times that the Avatar is the bridge between the human world and the spirit world. The Avatar maintains balance. The Avatar reincarnates cycling through the 4 nations in a fixed order: water, earth, fire, air. And when one Avatar dies, the next is born. The cycle is continuous. The cycle is eternal. The cycle is the single most important structural element of the entire Avatar world. But the show also tells you in Book 1, Chapter 12, The Storm, that the cycle can end. If the Avatar is killed in the Avatar state, the cycle is broken. No more reincarnation, no more bridge between worlds. No more balance, just a world without its immune system drifting into chaos with no mechanism for self-correction. This is why the Fire Nation wanted to kill Aang, not just to remove a military threat, but to end the cycle permanently. And this raises a question that the show never directly addresses. What would a world without the Avatar actually look like? The show gives you a partial answer in the form of the 100-Year War itself. For 100 years, the Avatar was absent, frozen in ice, removed from the world, functionally dead as far as anyone knew. And in those 100 years, the Fire Nation conquered most of the world. The air nomads were exterminated. The Southern Water Tribe was reduced to a handful of survivors. The Earth Kingdom was under siege. Ba Sing Se was being controlled from within by the Dai Li. The world did not end. It continued, but it continued wrong. It continued in a state of accelerating imbalance that was slowly consuming everything. 100 years of imbalance produced 100 years of war. What would a permanent absence produce? Would the 4 nations eventually destroy each other? Would the spirits intervene? Would bending itself change without the Avatar to anchor the relationship between the elements? The show does not say, because the show ends before these questions become relevant. Aang survives. The cycle continues. The crisis is averted, but the possibility lingers. And it is not just a theoretical possibility. Azula nearly ended the cycle in the Book 2 finale. In the catacombs beneath Ba Sing Se, she shot Aang with lightning while he was in the Avatar state. He died. The cycle, for a brief moment, was broken. And it was only Katara's spirit water, the water from the spirit oasis at the North Pole that she had been carrying since Book 1, that brought him back. The resurrection was not guaranteed. It was not part of a plan. It was luck, or providence, or the show's reluctance to commit to the darkest possible version of its own mythology. But for a moment, between the lightning and the healing, the Avatar cycle was over. The 1,000-lifetime chain of reincarnation was severed, and the show lets that moment exist without comment. It does not pause to explain the cosmic implications. It does not have a character say what almost happened. It simply shows you Aang falling, his eyes going dark, the glow fading, and then it shows you Katara catching him. And if you understand the mythology, if you have been paying attention, you understand that the distance between that moment and the end of everything was measured in the time it takes water to glow. There is a theory that this near death is why Aang's connection to his past lives is weaker in Book 3. He struggles to contact them. He cannot access the Avatar state at will. And the theory suggests that the lightning did not just hurt Aang's body, it damaged the chain of reincarnation itself. It frayed the connection between Aang and the 10,000 avatars who came before him. And the energy bending at the end of the series, the moment where Aang's spirit overwhelms Ozai's, is not just a test of Aang's will. It is a test of whether the chain still holds. Whether the accumulated wisdom and power of every previous avatar is still accessible to this one boy who was technically dead for several minutes in a cave beneath the largest city in the world. The show neither confirms nor denies this theory. It simply presents a character who was killed and resurrected, and lets you wonder what that does to a soul that is supposed to be eternal. It is a mystery about the nature of consciousness, about the continuity of identity, about whether a chain that has been broken and repaired is truly the same chain. And it is the kind of mystery that a show about children bending elements on a Nickelodeon time slot has no business asking, and asks anyway, and trusts you to carry it with you after the credits roll. But there is another dimension to the Space Sword mystery that connects to a larger question the show poses about its non-bending characters. Sokka is not the only non-bender in Team Avatar. There is also Suki, the Kyoshi warrior he falls in love with, and the show is remarkably quiet about what happens to their relationship after the finale. Sokka and Suki are shown together in the final scene, but The Legend of Korra, set 70 years later, never mentions Suki. She does not appear. She is not referenced as Sokka's wife. She is simply absent, in the same way the Space Sword is absent. Two pieces of Sokka's story that the show introduced, developed, and then allowed to drift into silence. And this silence is worth sitting with, because it tells you something about the kind of show Avatar is. It is not a show that wraps everything up. It is not a show that gives you an epilogue for every character. It is a show that trusts the world to keep going after the camera stops. And it trusts you to accept that not every thread has an ending. Some threads just keep unspooling, somewhere off-screen in a version of the story you will never be told. Which brings us to the 11th mystery, and it is one that touches every corner of the show without ever being directly addressed. It is the mystery of the Order of the White Lotus. In the early seasons of Avatar, there are small, almost invisible hints that a secret society exists beneath the surface of the Four Nations. Iroh plays Paisho with strangers in strange towns and uses a specific tile, the White Lotus tile, in a specific pattern that is clearly communicating something beyond the game. In Book 2, Chapter 15, The Tales of Ba Sing Se, Iroh plays Paisho with a man in Ba Sing Se and uses the White Lotus Gambit, and the man recognizes it, and suddenly they are no longer strangers. They are brothers in something the show has not yet named. The Order of the White Lotus is eventually revealed in Book 3 as an ancient secret society that transcends the boundaries of the Four Nations. Its members include some of the most powerful and wisest characters in the show. Iroh, King Bumi of Omashu, Master Pakku of the Northern Water Tribe, Master Pyandao, the swordsman who trained Sokka, Zhong Zhong, the deserter who was the first person to teach Aang firebending. These are men from different nations, different elements, different philosophies, united by something the show describes only in the vaguest terms. They seek philosophy, beauty, and truth. They share ancient knowledge across national and political divides. But the mystery is not what the Order is. The mystery is how it survived. For 100 years, the Fire Nation waged war against every other nation. Information was controlled. Borders were militarized. People from different nations were not supposed to communicate, let alone collaborate. And yet, the Order of the White Lotus maintained its network across all four nations for the entire duration of the war. Members from the Fire Nation conspired with members from the Earth Kingdom and the Water Tribes, sharing information, preserving knowledge, playing Paisho in tea shops as a cover for a secret society that was, in essence, a resistance movement hiding in plain sight. How? The show gives you the mechanism, the Paisho tiles, and the specific patterns. But it does not give you the logistics. How did Iroh, a Fire Nation general, communicate with Bumi, the king of a besieged Earth Kingdom city? How did Pakku, a master in the isolated Northern Water Tribe, coordinate with Pyandao, a swordsman in the Fire Nation heartland? How did any of them know where the others were, what they were doing, what their plans were? The answer, implied but never stated, is that the Order has been doing this for a very long time. long enough to have systems in place that predate the war, long enough to have safe houses, couriers, coded messages, trusted intermediaries in every nation. The Order of the White Lotus did not spring into existence to fight the 100-Year War. It existed before the war. It existed before the four nations as we know them. It is, in the show's mythology, one of the oldest institutions in the world. And it survived the war the same way it survived everything else, by being patient, by being invisible, by embedding itself so deeply in the daily life of every nation that no one thought to look for it. And this raises a question that the show never answers, and that keeps the mystery alive. If the Order of the White Lotus was this powerful, this organized, this embedded in every nation, why did it take 100 years to act? Why did it wait for a 12-year-old boy to do the hard work before it mobilized? Iroh's White Lotus army liberates Ba Sing Se in the finale. They retake the city from the Fire Nation with what appears to be a well-coordinated military operation. They had the power to do this, they had the organization, they had the members. Why did they wait? The show offers an implied answer through Iroh. When the group suggests that Iroh should fight Ozai instead of Aang, Iroh refuses. He says that if he, a Fire Nation man, defeated the Fire Lord, it would be seen as a brother killing a brother, a power grab, a coup. The world would not accept it as liberation. It would see it as more of the same. Only the Avatar, a figure outside the political structure of any single nation, could end the war in a way the world would accept as legitimate. This is a strategic answer and it makes sense, but it is also a convenient answer, because it means that the Order of the White Lotus, this ancient society of the world's greatest benders and thinkers, watched the world burn for 100 years and did nothing. They waited, they played Pai Sho, they preserved knowledge, they maintained their network, and they waited for a child to show up and shoulder the burden that they, with all their wisdom and all their power, chose not to carry. There is a reading of the Order that is deeply unflattering. A reading that says these wise old men had the ability to end the war decades earlier and chose not to because the political calculus was not right. That they prioritized the optics of victory over the lives lost during a century of war. That their patience was not wisdom but cowardice dressed in philosophical language. The show does not endorse this reading, but it does not foreclose it either. And the result is that the Order of the White Lotus occupies a complicated space in the show's moral universe. They are heroes. They liberate Ba Sing Se. They support Aang. They are wise and brave and powerful. And they are also men who watched a genocide happen and played board games for 100 years before they acted. The show lets both of these things be true simultaneously. And the tension between them is, itself, a mystery that has no clean resolution. The 12th mystery takes us back to the intimate, to the personal, to the question of what happens inside a mind when the weight it carries becomes too much. It is the mystery of Azula's breakdown. Azula is, for most of the series, the most competent antagonist the show has. She is introduced in Book 2 and immediately establishes herself as the thing Zuko could never be. Disciplined, precise, ruthless, brilliant. She conquers Ba Sing Se not through military force but through political manipulation. She breaks the Dai Li's loyalty to Long Feng with a speech. She shoots Aang with lightning at the exact moment he enters the Avatar state. She does not make mistakes. She does not hesitate. She is, in every scene she occupies, the most dangerous person in the room. And then, in Book 3, she unravels. The unraveling begins when Mai and Ty Lee betray her at the Boiling Rock prison in Book 3, Chapter 15, The Boiling Rock Part 2, which aired on July 16, 2008. Azula has always operated on a specific understanding of human relationships. People do what she says because they fear her. Fear is the mechanism. Fear is the guarantee. As long as people are afraid, they are predictable. As long as they are predictable, she is in control. Mai and Ty Lee's betrayal breaks this model. Mai chooses love over fear. She defies Azula to save Zuko. And Ty Lee, seeing Azula about to attack Mai, she blocks Azula to protect her friend. In a span of seconds, the two people closest to Azula choose something other than fear, and the philosophical foundation of Azula's entire personality cracks. From this moment forward, Azula deteriorates. She becomes paranoid. She banishes her servants, her advisors, her guards. She hallucinates her mother in the mirror. She cuts her own hair in a jagged, uneven mess. By the time of the final Agni Kai with Zuko, she is not fighting with precision. She is fighting with rage and desperation and a kind of grief so deep that it has no language. The mystery is not that Azula breaks. The mystery is what is underneath the break, because the hallucination she sees is her mother, and the words she hears are specific. She hears Ursa say that she loves her, and Azula, screaming, rejects it. She does not believe it. She has built her entire identity on the premise that her mother saw her as a monster. And the hallucination, the ghost of the mother who disappeared when Azula was a child, is trying to tell her otherwise, and she cannot accept it, because accepting it would mean that everything she has done, everything she has become, was built on a misunderstanding. This is the deepest mystery the show asks about Azula, and it has no answer. Was Azula always this way? Was she born with a mind that bent toward cruelty and control, or was she shaped into it by Ozai's favoritism and Ursa's perceived rejection? Is Azula a villain or a victim? Is her breakdown a consequence of her choices, or a revelation of the damage that was done to her before she was old enough to choose? The show does not resolve this. It does not give you a definitive answer about whether Azula is redeemable. It simply shows you a 14-year-old girl chained to a grate, sobbing, her firebending wild and blue and beautiful and utterly out of control, and it asks you to feel something complicated. Not sympathy exactly, not condemnation exactly, something in between, something that has no name, something that sits in the space where understanding meets uncertainty, and stays there, and does not resolve. Zuko's final scene with Azula is not triumphant. He does not celebrate his victory. He watches his sister break, and his face carries a grief that suggests he understands something the audience might not. He understands that Azula's breakdown is not separate from his story. It is the other side of it. Azula is what Zuko would have become if Iroh had not been there, if Ursa's love had not reached him, if the banishment had broken him instead of freeing him. Azula is the version of the story where the lost child does not find a way back. And the fact that Zuko can see this, can recognize his sister's pain even as she tries to kill him, is the show's quietest and most devastating statement about the nature of family. The 13th mystery is one that hides inside a character the show plays for laughs, and it is stranger and more compelling than you might expect. It is the theory that Ty Lee is a descendant of the air nomads. On the surface, this sounds absurd. Ty Lee is a Fire Nation citizen. She grew up in the Fire Nation. She attended the Royal Fire Academy for Girls alongside Azula and Mai. She is, by every visible marker, a Fire Nation girl. But the show gives you a series of details that, when placed together, form a pattern too consistent to be accidental. First, her eyes. Ty Lee has gray eyes. In the Avatar world, eye color is broadly associated with national origin. Fire Nation citizens have gold or amber eyes. Earth Kingdom citizens have green eyes. Water Tribe members have blue eyes. Aang has gray eyes. Aang has gray eyes. Every air nomad shown in the series has gray eyes. And Ty Lee, a girl from the Fire Nation. Second, her physical abilities. Ty Lee is extraordinarily acrobatic. She moves with a lightness and agility that no other character in the show matches. She runs across walls. She flips through the air with a grace that looks, if you are watching carefully, a lot like airbending without the air. Her movement style is visually closer to the circular, evasive patterns of airbending than to the direct, aggressive patterns of firebending. Third, her chi blocking. Ty Lee does not firebend. She is, as far as the show demonstrates, a non-bender. But she has an intimate knowledge of Kai pathways, of the energy flow within the human body, that allows her to shut down a bender's abilities with precise strikes. This knowledge of chi and its flow through the body is exactly the kind of knowledge the air nomads possessed. Guru Pathik, an associate of the air nomads, teaches Aang about the 7 chakras and the flow of energy. The air nomads' entire philosophical system was built on understanding energy, breath, and the invisible forces that move through living things. Fourth, and most telling, Ty Lee has 6 identical sisters. She is one of 7. And the show makes a point of this, because Ty Lee's motivation for joining Azula, beyond fear, is the desire to be unique, to stand out, to be seen as an individual rather than one face in a matching set. This connects to a specific air nomad trait. Air nomads were the only nation where every member was a bender. Every air nomad could airbend. This suggests an unusually strong genetic predisposition toward bending. If air nomad blood mixed with Fire Nation blood after the genocide, the bending gene might not express in every generation. But the physical traits, the gray eyes, the natural agility, the intuitive understanding of chi, could persist. And they could show up in a girl born into a large family where looking different from your sisters is the thing you want most in the world. The theory proposes that somewhere in Ty Lee's ancestry, an air nomad survived the genocide by hiding in the Fire Nation. Perhaps they were already living there, married to a Fire Nation citizen, when the attack came. Perhaps they fled and assimilated. Perhaps Aang's childhood friend Kuzan, the Fire Nation boy he played with before the war, helped shelter an air nomad who later married into a Fire Nation family. The theory cannot be proven. The show never confirms it. But the details are there, quiet and consistent, forming a picture that the show refuses to either complete or deny. And if the theory is true, it carries an emotional weight that transforms Ty Lee's character. It means that the girl who served the Fire Nation princess, who helped hunt the Avatar, who fought against everything the Air Nomad stood for, is herself a descendant of the people the Fire Nation tried to erase. It means the genocide failed, not because the Air Nomads survived as a culture, but because their blood survived, their traits survived, their gifts survived, embedded in the genetic code of a girl who does not even know what she is carrying. There is something beautiful and terrible about that. Beautiful because it means that no genocide, no matter how thorough, can erase a people completely. Something always survives. Some thread always persists. Terrible because it means the survivors did not know they were survivors. The heritage was lost even as the genes persisted. Ty Lee does not know she might be an Air Nomad descendant. She will never know. She will live her entire life as a Fire Nation citizen, and the Air Nomad blood in her veins will remain a secret that even she does not hold. A mystery inside a person who is herself a mystery. The 14th mystery is about time and age and the question of how long a person can live in the Avatar world when they are connected to the right kind of knowledge. It is the mystery of Guru Pathak. Guru Pathak appears in a single episode. Book 2, Chapter 19, The Guru, which aired on December 1st, 2006, he is an old man sitting at the Eastern Air Temple waiting for Aang. He claims to be a personal friend of Monk Gyatso. He knows things about Aang's past that only someone connected to the Air Nomads could know. He teaches Aang about the 7 chakras and guides him through the process of opening each one. He is wise, gentle, eccentric, and apparently ageless. But consider the timeline. Monk Gyatso died in the Air Nomad genocide, which occurred 100 years before the events of the show. If Pathak was Gyatso's personal friend, he must have known Gyatso at least 100 years ago, which means Pathak is, at minimum, 120 years old. More likely 130 or 140, given that friendship implies they were contemporaries, not separated by generations. The show never addresses this. It never explains how Pathak has lived this long. It never questions it. Aang does not ask. No one asks. Pathak is simply there, ancient and cheerful, drinking onion and banana juice, offering spiritual guidance with the casual authority of someone who has been doing it for longer than most civilizations remember. There are a few possibilities. The first is that the Avatar world simply has different rules about aging. King Bumi is 112 years old, and still one of the most powerful earthbenders alive. Kyoshi, a previous Avatar, lived to be 230. The show establishes that exceptional individuals can live far beyond what we would consider normal, and it never explains why some people age normally and others do not. The second possibility is that Pathak's spiritual practices have extended his life. The show draws heavily on Hindu and Buddhist traditions, and both traditions include the concept of yogic masters who, through extreme discipline, meditation, and control of their life energy, can extend their lifespans far beyond the ordinary. If Pathak has mastered the 7 chakras, if he has truly opened each one and maintained that opening for decades, it is possible that the flow of cosmic energy through his body has slowed or halted the aging process. He has not cheated death. He has simply expanded the space between birth and death through sheer spiritual discipline. The third possibility, and the strangest one, is that Pathak is not entirely human, or rather, that he was human once and has become something else through his connection to the spirit world. The show establishes that the boundary between the human world and the spirit world is permeable. Iroh crossed it and came back changed. You merged with the moon spirit and ceased to be human entirely. Is it possible that Pathak, in his decades of meditation at the Eastern Air Temple, has achieved a similar kind of transformation? That he has become a being who exists partially in the spirit world and partially in the physical world, and that this dual existence is what keeps him alive? The show does not answer this. It does not even acknowledge the question, and that silence is in a way the most appropriate response, because Guru Pathak is a character who exists outside the show's normal rules. He is not a warrior, he is not a bender, he is not a political figure, he is a mystic. And mystics, by definition, operate in a space where normal rules do not apply. Explaining Pathak would diminish him. The mystery is the point. He is there because he needs to be there, and the how of his being there is less important than the what he does when he arrives. The 15th and final mystery before we begin to draw these threads together is one that the show poses in its very first scene and returns to in its very last. It is the mystery of what the Avatar state actually is. The show gives you a functional definition. The Avatar state is a defense mechanism. It activates when the Avatar is in mortal danger. it channels the knowledge, skill, and power of every previous avatar into the current one, creating a being of immense and nearly unstoppable power. When the avatar's eyes glow, every past life is present, and the combined force of 10,000 lifetimes flows through a single body. But the show also shows you things that do not fit this definition. In Book 1, Chapter 3, the Southern Air Temple, the avatar state activates not because Aang is in physical danger, but because he is in emotional distress. He discovers Gyatso's skeleton. The grief overwhelms him, and the avatar state erupts, not as a defense mechanism, but as an expression of pain. It is not protecting Aang from an external threat. It is responding to an internal one, to grief so large that the body cannot contain it. This happens again in Book 2, Chapter 11, The Desert. Appa has been stolen. Aang's last connection to his previous life, his oldest friend, his companion, has been taken. And the avatar state activates again, not in response to danger, but in response to loss. Aang rises into the air, his eyes glowing, the sand around him swirling into a vortex of destruction, and the only thing that stops him from devastating everything around him is Katara grabbing his hand. These scenes suggest that the avatar state is not simply a defense mechanism. It is an emotional amplifier. It takes whatever the avatar is feeling and multiplies it by 10,000 lifetimes. If the avatar is feeling protective, the avatar state becomes protective. If the avatar is feeling grief, the avatar state becomes grief given cosmic power. If the avatar is feeling rage, the avatar state becomes rage on a scale that can reshape the landscape. This means that the avatar state is, at its core, not about power. It is about emotion. It is the accumulated emotional capacity of every avatar who has ever lived, channeled through one person. And this raises a question that the show never directly addresses. If the avatar state amplifies emotion, what happens if the avatar enters it while feeling love, or compassion, or peace? The show only shows you the avatar state in moments of crisis, in moments defined by fear, anger, or grief. But the logic of the system suggests that the avatar state, in a moment of genuine peace, would be something entirely different, something the show hints at but never fully reveals, something that might look less like a weapon and more like a prayer. The closest the show comes to showing you this is the final moment of the finale. Aang, after defeating Ozai, after energy bending, after the war is won, stands on a cliff at sunset. His eyes glow for a moment, not in anger, not in fear, just a brief flash of connection, a momentary alignment with every life that came before him, and then it fades, and he is just a boy again, standing on a cliff, watching the sun go down. At peace, that moment is the show's quietest statement about the avatar state. It is saying that the truest expression of 10,000 lifetimes is not destruction. It is stillness. It is the accumulated wisdom of every avatar arriving at the same conclusion, that the war is over, that the world is healing, that for this one moment, everything is in balance. And the eyes glow not because the power is needed, but because the past lives are watching, and they are satisfied and they are letting this boy know that he did well. And then the glow fades, and the boy is alone, and the sun goes down, and the story ends. But the mystery does not, because you are left wondering what 10,000 lifetimes of peace would feel like, what that glow would look like if it lasted, what the avatar state would become if it were not a weapon but a way of being. And the show, in its final moments, gives you just enough to imagine it, just enough to carry with you as you close your eyes, just enough to wonder. Now, before we draw all of these threads together, there are several more questions worth sitting with. Questions that are smaller in scale but no less compelling, and that collectively form a picture of a world with more hidden rooms than any single tour could ever visit. There is the question of what happened to the other air temples between the genocide and Aang's return. 100 years is a long time. The Southern Air Temple, when Aang visits it in Book 1, is remarkably intact. The structures are standing, the airball court is recognizable, Gyatso's skeleton is where it fell. But 100 years of weather, of erosion, of nature reclaiming stone and wood should have done more damage than what the show depicts. The temples sit at extreme elevations, exposed to wind and ice and rain. A century without maintenance should have reduced them to ruins. Unless someone was maintaining them, not the air nomads who were dead, not the Fire Nation who had no interest in preservation, but perhaps the spirits. The air temples were, before the war, places of deep spiritual significance. They were built at the convergence of natural energy lines. They were designed not just as homes, but as conduits, places where the barrier between the physical world and the spirit world was thin. And spirits, as the show establishes, are drawn to places of spiritual significance. They inhabit forests, lakes, oases, anywhere the natural world is rich with energy. Is it possible that spirits maintained the air temples during the century of Aang's absence? That the temples survived not because of their construction, but because some presence in the spirit world recognized them as sacred and protected them from decay? The show never says this. But the show also never explains why the Southern Air Temple looks like it was abandoned last year rather than a century ago. And in a world where spirits burn down forests out of grief and the moon is a fish swimming in a pond, the idea that spirits might preserve a temple out of reverence is not particularly strange. There is also the question of what Wan Shi Tong, the knowledge spirit, actually knew about the war and why he chose to act the way he did. In Book 2, Chapter 10, The Library, which aired on July 14, 2006, Team Avatar discovers a vast library buried in the Siwang Desert. The library belongs to Wan Shi Tong, an owl spirit who has been collecting knowledge for thousands of years. He permits humans to enter his library on the condition that they use the knowledge for scholarly purposes only, not for military advantage. Sokka violates this agreement. He searches for information about the Fire Nation that could be used to plan an invasion, and when Wan Shi Tong discovers this, he attacks the group and sinks the library into the sand, taking it back to the spirit world. On the surface, Wan Shi Tong is a guardian of knowledge who is betrayed by human visitors who used his collection as a weapon. He is justified in his anger, but there is something that does not add up. Wan Shi Tong has been collecting knowledge for thousands of years. His library contains information about every nation, every culture, every historical event. He claims to have knowledge that humans do not, and yet during the 100-Year War, a conflict that was reshaping the entire world, Wan Shi Tong did nothing. He sat in his library, surrounded by the accumulated knowledge of civilization, and watched a genocide happen. He watched a war consume the world. He had the information that could have stopped it, could have revealed Fire Nation strategy, could have warned the air nomads, could have done something, and he did nothing. Why? The surface answer is that Wan Shi Tong is a spirit, and spirits do not concern themselves with human affairs. But this answer is contradicted by the show itself. Heibai concerned himself with a burned forest. The ocean spirit concerned itself with the siege of the North Pole. Ko concerned himself with stealing faces. Spirits in the Avatar world are not indifferent. They have opinions, preferences, grudges. They intervene when they care about something. Wan Shi Tong's decision not to intervene suggests that he does not care about human suffering. He cares about knowledge. Knowledge is sacred. Human lives are not, at least not to him. And this raises a question about the nature of spirits in the Avatar world that the show explores, but never resolves. Are spirits moral beings? Do they have obligations to the physical world? Or are they something older and stranger, entities that operate on a different value system entirely, one that a human mind can comprehend, but not share? The show suggests the latter, and the implications are disturbing, because if spirits are immoral, if they do not recognize human suffering as something worth preventing, then the entire spiritual cosmology of the Avatar world is not benevolent. It is the spirits maintain balance not because they care about human well-being, but because balance is the state that allows them to exist comfortably. The Avatar maintains balance not because the spirits love humanity, but because imbalance causes problems for the spirit world. And human suffering, as long as it does not disturb the cosmic equilibrium, is simply not their concern. This is a dark reading of the Avatar world, and the show never fully endorses it, but the evidence is there in the actions and inactions of the spirits across 3 seasons. And the question it raises is, 1, that the show trusts you to carry without needing it resolved. Are we protected by the spirits, or are we simply useful to them? And is there a difference? There is another theory that has circulated for years and touches on something the show hints at but never confirms. The theory that firebending, unlike the other 3 elements, was fundamentally changed by the 100-Year War. The show establishes in Book 3, Chapter 13, The Firebending Masters, that the original form of firebending was taught by dragons. And the fire the dragons produce is not the orange-red fire that the Fire Nation uses. It is multicolored, a spectrum of light that contains every color that is alive and beautiful and creative. The Sun Warriors, who preserve this original form, do not use fire as a weapon. They use it as an expression of life energy. Their firebending is closer to a dance than a martial art. But the Fire Nation abandoned this tradition. After Fire Lord Sozin began hunting dragons to extinction, claiming that killing a dragon proved a firebender's power, the connection to the original source of firebending was severed. The Sun Warriors went into hiding, the dragons disappeared, and firebending, cut off from its roots, became something else. It became rage. It became power. It became the tool of conquest that the Fire Nation used to wage war on the world. The theory proposes that the 100-Year War did not just use firebending as a weapon. It damaged firebending itself. That a century of firebenders being taught to draw their power from anger rather than life energy fundamentally altered the nature of the element as it was practiced. That the Fire Nation's fire is not the same substance as the dragon's fire. That it is a corrupted form, a shadow of what firebending was supposed to be. And that the corruption runs so deep that most firebenders do not even know they are practicing a diminished version of their own art. If this is true, it means that Ozai, the most powerful firebender alive, is also the most diminished. His power comes from rage and dominance, and therefore it is, in the show's deeper cosmology, not true power at all. It is a counterfeit, a substitution of force for understanding, of aggression for creation. And Aang and Zuko, who learned the original form from the dragons who experienced the multicolored fire, are not just better firebenders. They are practicing a different art entirely. An art that predates the corruption. An art that remembers what fire was before the war turned it into a weapon. This reframes the entire conflict of the series. The 100-Year War is not just a political conflict. It is a spiritual one. The Fire Nation did not just conquer territory. It corrupted an element. It took the most creative, the most vital, the most alive of the four elements and turned it into a tool of destruction. And the resolution of the war is not just the defeat of Ozai, it is the restoration of fire itself, the return to the original source, the remembering of what was forgotten. And the mystery is whether that restoration is complete. Whether, after the war, firebending returns to its original form, or whether the century of corruption has left permanent scars on the art. The show does not answer this. The Legend of Korra shows firebending 70 years later, and it looks the same as it always did. Aggressive, powerful, drawn from will rather than understanding. Which suggests that the corruption persists, that the war ended but the damage it did to fire itself did not heal, that some things, once broken, do not go back to the way they were, no matter how many dragons you rediscover. And then there is perhaps the most personal mystery in the entire show, one that the audience experiences directly, but that the characters within the show can never perceive. It is the mystery of Aang's 100-year sleep and what, if anything, he dreamed. Aang was frozen in ice for 100 years. His body was preserved. His mind was presumably inactive. He entered the ice as a 12-year-old boy fleeing his responsibilities, and emerged from it as a 12-year-old boy in a world he did not recognize. For Aang, no time passed. He went to sleep in one world and woke up in another. The 100-Year War, the genocide, the fall of the air nomads, the conquest of the Earth Kingdom, all of it happened in the space between one breath and the next. But was his mind truly inactive? The show gives you one small piece of evidence that suggests otherwise. When Aang wakes up, he recognizes Katara. Not in the way you recognize a stranger. He looks at her with a familiarity that the show never explains. His first words to her are casual, almost intimate, as if he has been expecting her. As if, on some level, he already knows who she is. This could be explained by the Avatar's spiritual awareness. It could be a narrative convenience, a way of establishing the connection between Aang and Katara quickly. But there is a theory that Aang, during his 100 years in the ice, was not unconscious. He was in the spirit world, or somewhere adjacent to it. A state of awareness that was not waking consciousness but was not true sleep either. A state where the Avatar's connection to the spirit realm kept his mind partially active, drifting through a century of visions, half-formed images, echoes of the world changing around him. If Aang dreamed during those 100 years, what did he dream of? Did he dream of the air nomads dying? Did he feel the genocide happening distantly through the spiritual connection that binds the Avatar to the world? Did he dream of the war, of battles he could not see, of suffering he could not prevent? Did he dream of Katara, a girl who had not been born yet, the person who would one day crack the ice and wake him up? The show does not say. It does not even hint at it beyond that first moment of recognition. But the idea that Aang spent 100 years dreaming of a world in agony, unable to wake, unable to act, trapped in a prison of ice and sleep and helplessness, adds a layer of quiet horror to his character that the show never directly addresses. Because if Aang dreamed, then he knows. He knows on some deep and inarticulate level everything that happened while he was gone. He knows the air nomads died. He knows the world suffered. He knows that his absence was the gap through which a century of pain flowed. And he carries that knowledge without words, without memories, without anything he could point to and say, "This is what I dreamed." Just a feeling, a heaviness, a sense that something happened in the dark, something vast and terrible, and he was there for all of it and could do nothing. This would explain something about Aang that the show depicts but never fully accounts for. his urgency, his determination, his willingness to throw himself at every problem, every conflict, every crisis, with a desperation that sometimes looks less like heroism and more like penance. Aang does not just want to save the world, he needs to. And the need is deeper than duty. It is deeper than destiny. It is the need of a person who was present for a century of suffering and could not lift a finger to stop it, who slept through the worst period in human history and woke up knowing in his bones, if not in his mind, that the sleep was not innocent. That being absent is not the same as being blameless, that the world burned while he dreamed, and the only thing he can do now is make sure it never burns again. There is one more cluster of mysteries worth visiting before we start pulling these threads together. They are the mysteries that live not in the plot or the characters, but in the bending system itself. The questions about what bending is, where it comes from, and what the show's rules actually allow. The most fundamental of these questions is one the show raises in its opening narration, and then spends 3 seasons carefully avoiding. Why can some people bend and others cannot? The show establishes that bending is not universal. Not every person in the Fire Nation can firebend. Not every person in the Earth Kingdom can earthbend. Bending appears to be partially genetic, running in families but not always predictably. Katara is the last waterbender in the Southern Water Tribe, born to 2 non-bending parents. Sokka, her brother, cannot bend at all. Toph is the only earthbender in a family of wealthy non-benders. Ty Lee, surrounded by 6 identical sisters, is the one who develops chi blocking instead of firebending. The show hints at a spiritual dimension to bending that goes beyond genetics. The Air Nomads were the only nation where every single member could bend. Every Air Nomad was an airbender, no exceptions. And the Air Nomads were also the most spiritually attuned culture in the Avatar world. Their lives were organized around meditation, spiritual discipline, and connection to the natural world. The show implies a correlation between spiritual attunement and bending ability, but it never confirms whether the Air Nomads could all bend because they were spiritual, or whether they were spiritual because they could all bend. The Legend of Korra complicates this further with harmonic convergence, an event that bestows air bending on random non-benders throughout the world. This suggests that bending is not purely genetic. It can be activated by spiritual events. It can be given, and if it can be given, it can presumably be taken, which is exactly what energy bending does. All of which suggests that bending is not a physical trait like eye color or height. It is something more elusive, something closer to a talent or a calling, something that exists at the intersection of the physical and the spiritual, determined by factors that neither the characters nor the audience can fully see. And this leads to an even stranger question. If bending exists at the intersection of the physical and the spiritual, and if the Avatar is the bridge between those two worlds, does the Avatar influence who can and cannot bend? Is the Avatar simply by existing the thing that makes bending possible? And if the Avatar cycle were to end, would bending itself eventually fade? The show never asks this question directly, but the logic of its world points toward it. The Avatar maintains balance between the physical and spirit worlds. Bending exists at the intersection of those worlds. Remove the bridge, and the intersection collapses. Remove the Avatar, and the thing that makes bending possible disappears. Not immediately, not dramatically, but slowly across generations, like a language that no one speaks anymore because the culture that sustained it has been erased. This is speculative, the show does not confirm it, but it is the kind of speculation that the show's world building supports, the kind that grows naturally from the rules the show establishes, and the fact that the show never addresses it is not a flaw. It is evidence that the world is deep enough to support questions that even the creators may not have considered. There is also the mystery of the sub-bending disciplines and why they appear when they do. Metal bending, lightning generation, lightning redirection, combustion bending, lava bending in the sequel series. Each of these is a specialized application of one of the 4 elements, a technique that extends the boundaries of what the base element can do. And each of them appears at a specific point in history, suggesting that bending is not static. It evolves, it grows, new techniques are discovered or invented, and once discovered, they spread. Toph invents metal bending in Book 2, Chapter 19, The Guru. She is trapped in a metal cage. She is desperate, and in her desperation, she perceives something no earthbender has ever perceived before. That metal is not a separate substance. It is earth. Refined, processed, purified earth, but earth nonetheless. And within the metal, there are trace impurities, tiny particles of raw earth, that a bender with sufficient sensitivity can detect and manipulate. The mystery is not that Toph can do this. The show has established that she is the greatest earthbender alive, with a seismic sense so refined that she can detect heartbeats through stone. The mystery is that no one in the history of earthbending has done it before her. Thousands of years of earthbenders. Thousands of years of metal existing in the world. And not one of them, across the entire history of the Avatar world, thought to look for the Earth inside the metal. Why not? The answer the show implies is that they did not think of it because they had been taught not to think of it. The culture of earthbending drew a line between earth and metal, between natural and refined, between bendable and unbendable. And that line was not physical. It was conceptual. It was a belief shared across generations that metal was beyond the reach of earthbending. And because everyone believed it, it was true. Not because of physics, not because of the nature of the element, but because of the nature of belief. Toph breaks the belief because she does not share it. She has never been taught the conventional wisdom of earthbending academies. She learned from the Badgermoles, the original earthbenders, creatures who have no concept of what is supposed to be impossible. She learned to feel the earth rather than think about it. And when she is trapped in that cage, she does not think about whether metal can be bent. She simply feels for something she can move. And she finds it. And in finding it, she overturns 1,000 years of assumed limitation. This is the deepest mystery of bending. It is not a mystery about physics or spiritual energy. It is a mystery about the human mind. The limits of bending are not set by the elements. They are set by the benders, by what they believe, what they assume, what they have been taught to accept as boundaries. And the greatest benders in the show, the ones who push the art forward, are the ones who refuse to accept those boundaries. Toph, who bends metal because she does not know she cannot. Hama, who bends blood because desperation strips away assumption. Ira, who redirects lightning by thinking across elemental boundaries. Aang, who energy bends because a creature older than the Four Nations tells him there was a time before the rules existed. The implication is staggering. If the limits of bending are mental rather than physical, then the Avatar world is a world where the thing standing between a person and their full potential is not their body, not their element, not their genetics, but their imagination. A world where the impossible is just the not yet imagined, where every boundary is a belief, and every belief can be questioned, and every question can become a new form of bending that no one has ever seen. And the show, by presenting this implication through action rather than exposition, by showing you Toph ripping apart a metal cage rather than having a character explain the philosophy, trusts you to understand the larger point. That this is not just a story about a world where people move rocks and shoot fire. It is a story about the nature of limitation itself, about the prisons we build from our own assumptions, about the radical, terrifying, liberating possibility that the walls are not as solid as they look. Consider what this means for the mysteries we have been discussing tonight. If the limits of bending are mental, then the iceberg is not a mystery about physics. It is a mystery about what the Avatar state believes it can do when a 12-year-old boy is about to die. Combustion bending is not a mystery about a third eye. It is a mystery about a person who believed, with absolute conviction, that fire could be focused through the mind. Bloodbending is not a mystery about the full moon. It is a mystery about a woman so desperate that she stopped believing in the distinction between water in a stream and water in a body. And energy bending, the technique that resolves the entire series, is the logical conclusion of this principle. The lion turtle tells Aang that before the four elements, people bent the energy within themselves, before the categories, before the limitations, before anyone drew a line between earth and water and fire and air and said, these are the options. There was a time when bending had no boundaries, when the only limit was the bender's connection to the energy of life itself. The Avatar world began with no limits. And then people, being people, created limits, drew categories, built systems, decided what was possible and what was not. And the show, across 3 seasons and 61 episodes, tells the story of a boy who dismantles those limits one by one. Not through force, not through study, but through the simple, radical act of not accepting them. That is the meta-mystery of Avatar: The Last Airbender. Not any single unsolved question, but the question underneath all the questions. The question of what is possible when you stop believing in the impossible. The question of what the world looks like when you remove the assumptions you did not know you were carrying. The show does not answer this question. No story could, but it points you toward it. It opens the door and lets you stand at the threshold and feel the breeze of something vast on the other side. And then it steps back and it trusts you to carry the feeling with you. Into sleep, into dreams, into whatever comes next. And there are a few more corners of this world worth visiting before the night is over. Small mysteries that do not demand long investigations, but that, taken together, add texture to the larger picture. There is the mystery of the Dai Li and their true origins. The Dai Li are the secret police of Ba Sing Se, first introduced in Book 2 as agents of Long Feng, who use earthbending to control the population through fear and brainwashing. The show tells you that they were founded by Avatar Koshi. That is worth repeating. The Dai Li, the most authoritarian organization in the Earth Kingdom, the group that brainwashes dissenters and maintains a police state within the walls of the world's largest city, was created by the Avatar. Koshi founded the Dai Li to protect the cultural heritage of Ba Sing Se. She intended them as guardians, keepers of order, protectors of the city's traditions and way of life. But somewhere between Kyoshi's lifetime and the events of the show, roughly 400 years, the Dai Li transformed from protectors into oppressors. The organization Kyoshi created to defend culture became an organization that suppresses it. The Guardians became the jailers. The mystery is how this happened, and the show does not trace the history. It simply presents you with the end result and lets you fill in the centuries of corruption yourself. But the deeper mystery, the one that connects to the show's larger themes, is what this says about institutions. Every institution in Avatar was created with good intentions. The Four Nations existed to maintain balance. The Order of the White Lotus existed to preserve knowledge. The Dai Li existed to protect culture. And every one of them, given enough time, drifted from its founding purpose. The nations went to war. The Order waited a century to act. The Dai Li became the thing they were supposed to prevent. The show is making a quiet argument about the nature of power and the passage of time. It is saying that no institution, no matter how well-intentioned, is immune to corruption. That the gap between what an organization is supposed to do and what it actually does widens with every generation that passes. And that the only thing that can correct the drift is individual action. Not another institution, a person. An avatar, a 12-year-old boy who looks at the way things are and says, "This is not the way things should be." There is also the mystery of the comet itself, Sozin's Comet, the celestial event that enabled the air nomad genocide that the Fire Nation has been waiting a century to use again, and that provides the climactic deadline of the entire series. The comet amplifies firebending to an extraordinary degree. During its passage, firebenders can generate power on a scale that would normally be impossible. Ozai uses it to attempt the destruction of the entire Earth Kingdom. Iroh uses it to retake Ba Sing Se. The comet does not care who uses its power. It amplifies without discrimination. But where did it come from? Why does it amplify firebending? The show says the comet returns every 100 years. It gives the comet a name, Sozin's Comet, but that is a human name given by humans who experienced its power during Sozin's War. The comet itself predates Sozin. It predates the Fire Nation. It predates possibly the human race. It is a natural phenomenon, a celestial body on a fixed orbital path that happens to interact with firebending in a way that the show never explains. Is the comet a spirit? Is it a remnant of some ancient cosmic event? Is it connected to the sun the way the moon is connected to waterbending? And if so, what is its relationship to the original firebenders, the dragons who drew their power not from rage, but from life energy? The show does not address any of this. It treats the comet as a narrative device, a ticking clock that gives the finale its urgency. And it does not explore the cosmological implications. But the implications are there, buried in the show's mythology, waiting for someone to dig them up. And then there is, quietly, the mystery of what happened to the world after the show ended. Not the comics, not the Legend of Korra. The immediate aftermath. The first days and weeks and months after the war ended. Consider what the world looks like on July 20th, 2008, the day after the finale airs. Ozai is defeated. The comet has passed. The war is over, but the Fire Nation still controls most of the Earth Kingdom. Fire Nation colonies have existed in Earth Kingdom territory for 100 years. People have been born in those colonies, raised in those colonies, built lives and families in those colonies. They are not conquerors. They are residents. Some of them are third or fourth generation. Some of them have never known any other home. What happens to these people? Do they leave? Do they stay? Do they integrate? The war ending does not erase a century of occupation. It does not undo the marriages between Fire Nation colonists and Earth Kingdom locals. It does not erase the children who are both Fire Nation and Earth Kingdom, who bend fire in an Earth Kingdom town and do not know which nation they belong to. The show does not address this. The Legend of Korra later establishes that the Fire Nation colonies became Republic City, a melting pot where all four nations coexist. But the process of getting from the end of the war to the founding of Republic City is never shown. And that process, the messy, difficult, probably violent process of decolonization and reconciliation, is perhaps the most realistic mystery the show leaves behind. Because it is a mystery the real world has faced countless times. What do you do when the war is over, but the damage persists? How do you build a just peace when the injustice has been going on for generations? How do you tell someone to go home when the place they are standing is the only home they have ever known? Aang faces this question in the comics, and his answer is complicated and imperfect, as real answers to real problems tend to be. But in the show itself, the question is simply posed and left hanging. The war is over. The world is broken. The 12-year-old boy who ended the war is now supposed to figure out how to fix it. And the show, in its wisdom, stops before it has to show you how hard that actually is. There is something intentional about this. The show ends on a moment of peace, of quiet triumph, of a boy and a girl kissing on a balcony while the sun sets over Ba Sing Se. It does not show you the peace negotiations. It does not show you the war crimes tribunals. It does not show you the refugee crises and the territorial disputes and the decades of diplomatic maneuvering that would follow the end of a 100-year war. It gives you the beautiful moment and lets the difficult reality exist off-screen, in the space between the finale and whatever comes next. And the mystery is whether this is a kindness or an evasion, whether the show is protecting its audience from the messy reality of post-war reconstruction, or whether it is making a deliberate artistic choice to end on hope rather than complexity. The answer probably is both. The show is a children's show, and children deserve stories that end with sunsets and kissing. But it is also a show that has never insulted its audience's intelligence, and the fact that it poses the question at all, the fact that you leave the finale knowing that the hard work is just beginning, is its way of trusting you to think about the parts of the story it chose not to tell. This is, in the end, what all of Avatar's mysteries have in common. They are invitations, not puzzles to be solved, but doors to be opened. Each one leads to a room that is larger than the show, a space where the world extends past the edges of the screen and into the territory of your own imagination. The show builds the walls, it furnishes the rooms it has time to furnish, and then it opens a door and steps back and says, "There is more in here than I could ever show you. Go look for yourself." And that is what makes these mysteries different from the mysteries in most stories. They are not failures of exposition. They are acts of generosity. They are the show giving you permission to keep thinking, keep wondering, keep exploring, long after the credits have rolled and the screen has gone dark. They are the show's way of saying that the world it built is not just a backdrop for a story. It is a real place with real history and real depth and real questions that do not have tidy answers. And you are welcome to visit anytime. You are welcome to wander. You are welcome to get lost in the corridors of a world that was built with more love and more care than any single story could ever exhaust. And perhaps the quietest mystery of all is the one about Momo, the flying lemur that Aang finds at the Southern Air Temple, the only other living creature besides Appa connected to the air nomads. Momo is played for comedy throughout the series. He steals food, he chatters, he sits on people's heads. He is the comic relief animal companion that children's shows have always had. But consider what Momo represents. He is a winged lemur, a species that lived at the air temples. The Fire Nation killed every air nomad and destroyed the temples. And yet, Momo survived. He was there, in the ruins, alive, when Aang arrived. 100 years after the genocide, 100 years after the Fire Nation tried to erase every trace of air nomad civilization from the world. How did Momo survive? The Air Temple lemurs are small creatures. They are not benders. They do not have the Avatar state. They cannot freeze themselves in ice. And yet this one lemur, or his ancestors, survived a military assault that killed every human in the temple. They survived 100 years of isolation. They survived without the monks who fed them and cared for them and shared the temple with them. The answer is probably simple. The lemurs hid. They retreated to parts of the temple the soldiers could not reach. High alcoves and narrow passages and cliff faces that only a flying creature could access. They were too small and too insignificant for the Fire Nation to hunt. They survived because they were overlooked, because the genocide was designed to kill people, not animals, because the soldiers looked for monks and did not look up. But there is something poignant about this that the show lets you feel without ever pointing to it. Momo is alive because he is small, because he does not matter. The Fire Nation killed every person in the temple and left the lemurs because lemurs do not threaten empires. The air nomad culture, the philosophy, the bending art, the spiritual tradition, all of it was destroyed. But the lemurs survived. The small, unimportant, overlooked creatures survived when everything important was taken. And finding Momo, finding this one small piece of his old life still breathing in the ruins of everything he lost, does not comment on the miracle of it. He does not reflect on what Momo's survival means. He simply takes the lemur and names him and carries him along for the rest of the journey. Because Aang, more than anyone, understands that survival is not always grand. Sometimes, It is small. Sometimes it is quiet. Sometimes it is a lemur sitting on your shoulder eating a peach, alive for no reason other than the fact that the people who wanted everything dead did not think to look in his direction. And there is a theory, half serious and half sentimental, that Momo is not just any lemur, that he is a reincarnation of Monk Gyatso, that the spirit of Aang's mentor, the man who loved him most, the man who died surrounded by Fire Nation soldiers in a last stand that he knew he could not win, found its way into the body of a small, ridiculous, food-stealing flying lemur and waited 100 years for his student to come home. The show does not confirm this. The creators have been asked about it and their answers have been deliberately ambiguous. But the theory persists because it is too beautiful to let go of. The idea that Gyatso, who could not protect Aang in life, found a way to stay close to him in death. That the lemur on Aang's shoulder is not just a pet but a guardian. Not just an animal, but a promise kept across a century and beyond the boundary of death itself. It is a mystery that cannot be solved. It is a mystery that does not need to be solved. It is enough to hold it, to let it sit beside you in the dark, to fall asleep with the possibility that the people who loved us never truly leave, that they find ways to stay close, that the small, warm breathing thing beside you might be more than it appears. But these 10 mysteries, as specific and distinct as they are, point toward something larger. They point toward the single deepest mystery in Avatar, the last airbender, the one that underlies all the others. It is the mystery of the world itself. The question of what this world is and how it works and why it exists and what, if anything, it means. The Avatar world is not a typical fantasy setting. It does not have the clear moral cosmology of a Tolkien universe, where good and evil are defined forces with identifiable sources. It does not have the mechanistic magic system of a Sanderson novel, where every power has explicit rules and known limitations. The Avatar world operates on something closer to spiritual intuition. The spirits are real, but their motivations are alien. The elements are real, but their boundaries are fuzzy. Bending follows rules until it does not, and when it does not, the show simply shows you something new and expects you to accept it. This is, in some ways, the show's greatest strength and its greatest source of mystery. The world feels real because it feels incomplete. It feels like a world that extends beyond what the camera shows you, a world that has history you have not been told, and rules you have not been taught, and places you have not been taken. The mysteries are not bugs. They are features. They are the evidence that the world of Avatar is too large to be fully captured in 61 episodes. And there is something comforting about that. There is something comforting about a world that has edges you cannot see, depths you cannot reach, questions you cannot answer. Because the real world is like that too. The real world is full of things that happened before you were born, and things that will happen after you die, and things that are happening right now in places you will never visit. The real world is a mystery that never resolves. And the Avatar world, by refusing to resolve its own mysteries, is telling you something about the nature of stories themselves. That the best ones do not end. They simply stop being told, and the world inside them keeps going, keeps asking questions, keeps living, long after the last episode airs. Consider, just for a moment, how many stories are happening in the Avatar world that the show never tells. The waterbender in the Northern Water Tribe who discovered a new healing technique on the same day Aang was learning to earthbend. The firebender who deserted Ozai's army and has been living in the Earth Kingdom under a false name for 20 years. The child born in a small village who will never learn that the 100-Year War ended, because the news takes months to reach places that far from the capitals. The spirit in the deep forest who has been watching humans for 10,000 years and has never once been visited by an avatar. These stories are not in the show. But the show makes you believe they exist, and the belief is the mystery. It is the thing that keeps you thinking about the Avatar world years after you have finished watching it. Not the plot, not the characters as wonderful as they are, but the world itself. The sense that behind every answered question is another question, and behind that question is another, and behind that is the vast unexplored territory of a world that was built with more care than any single story could ever use. The show's creators understood something that many storytellers miss. They understood that the purpose of a mystery is not to be solved. The purpose of a mystery is to make you feel the size of the world you are looking at. A world with no mysteries is a world that fits inside your head. A world with mysteries is a world that extends beyond it. And the world of Avatar, with its unsolved questions and unexplained powers and unresolved absences, is a world that will never fit inside your head. It will always be a little too large, a little too deep, a little too strange, and that is exactly why, 15 years after the last episode aired, people are still talking about it. Still wondering, still theorizing, still asking questions that the show never answered and may never answer, and that are better somehow for remaining unanswered. There is a philosophy to that, too. The ancient Chinese philosopher Zhuangzi wrote that the fish trap exists because of the fish. Once you have gotten the fish, you can forget the trap. The purpose of a mystery is not the answer. It is the wondering, the state of not knowing, the comfortable, drifting, half-asleep space where possibilities are alive and the world is larger than the facts allow. And that is where we are right now, in the space between questions and answers. In the place where Jet might be alive, and Ursa might be out there, and Iroh might be waving its spirits, and the space sword might be lying in a field somewhere, catching moonlight. You do not need to solve any of this tonight. You do not need to answer any of these questions. You just need to hold them, gently, the way you hold a thought that is interesting but not urgent. The way you hold a question at 2 in the morning when the world is quiet and the only thing moving is your mind. The show began on February 21st, 2005, with a boy trapped in ice. It ended on July 19th, 2008, with a world still full of questions, 3 years, 61 episodes, and enough mysteries to keep a fandom alive for nearly 2 decades. Some of those mysteries have been answered, most have not. And the ones that have not are the ones that matter most, because they are the ones that keep the world alive, the ones that keep you wondering, the ones that make you feel, even now, even tonight, that somewhere in the Avatar world, a story you have never heard is still being told. And that is worth falling asleep to. If you found something worth wondering about tonight, subscribing helps more than you might think. Thank you for staying. Sleep well. I will see you in the next one.